Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Triangulation is brought to you by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Triangulation episode number 344, recorded on Friday, April 27, 2018. Byron Reese, The Fourth Age. This episode of Triangulation is brought to you by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Home plays a big role in your life. That's why Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage. It lets you apply simply and understand the entire mortgage process fully so that you can be confident that you're getting the right mortgage for you. Get started at rocketmortgage.com/triangulation. Welcome to Triangulation. This is the show where we bring the luminaries of the tech world, the people with the big ideas, and we ask them what those ideas are all about. I'm Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit, and today we have a special guest, a man who has more than a quarter century of experience in the tech industry and has intimate knowledge of how it works. He's presided over multiple acquisitions and IPOs. He is the CEO and publisher of a technology research company known as GigaOM, and he hosts podcasts about artificial intelligence and how tech is changing work, education, and culture. He's been a speaker at events like South by Southwest, the Wolfram Data Summit, and TEDx. We are so happy to have Mr. Byron Reese as our guest for this episode. Mr. Reese, thank you very much for joining us on Triangulation.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, we brought you here because you are a futurist, but you're a futurist who believes that technology will actually bring about the golden age of humanity, which is not actually a very common position for futurists these days.
Right, which is a little perplexing given that technology has kind of been delivering the goods for a long time, and it's done nothing but increase our standard of living, our life expectancy, and all of the rest. And I don't know why it seems that inexplicably, as it were, the narratives kind of turned on technology, and somehow, this technology is a philosophically really interesting thing. It's something that multiplies what people are able to do. It enhances what people are able to do. You can, move more bricks with a forklift than you can on your back. And that is an inherent good. That's like increasing people's productivity is just like a great thing. I mean, I doubt I work harder than my great-grandparents worked, but I live a much more comfortable life because an hour of my time gives me more productivity than an hour of their time gave them. And so I don't understand how it is that we can look at technology and then, say, it's, now it's bad.
Well, I think that's the big tease for this episode because you've taken the stance that, look, this is good. This is progress. And I think you are pushing upstream. You're going against all the narratives that show us the bleak futures of technology, the dehumanizing effects of the communication systems that we're building. And I think that's wonderful. That's why we have you on the show. But before we get to that, which, by the way, is going to be based around your book, which is The Fourth Age, Smart Robots, Conscious Computers, and the Future of Humanity, I want to talk a little bit about you because we teased it in the open that you have 25 plus years of experience in the tech industry, which is a lot. I mean, by technology standards, that's a lifetime. What have you been doing as you've been moving from company to company, acquisition to acquisition, IPO to IPO? What kind of experiences have you picked up?
Well, I'm 49 years old, and like a lot of people in tech my age, I got started. My first computer was a Commodore VIC-20. It had 5K of memory, and I learned to code on that. Then I got a Commodore 64, and then one thing led to the other, and then I went into the field, and I've always just been attracted. I've always been enamored by technology and just this kind of free lunch idea that it gives people so much more capability than they had before. And so, I've had media companies, and I've just worked in different technology companies, starting them. Not all of which have worked out particularly well, and I kind of go from one interesting thing to the other.
See, I love to hear that because there was a time, and I know a lot of our audience won't believe me or they won't have a reference for this, but there was a time where it was not a prestige job to be working in high tech, in IT. It was one of these, oh, that's what the geeks and the nerds do. And okay, they'll do their thing, but the real business, the real money to be made is over in finance on the East Coast. And we slowly built up our industry, and we slowly showed what we could do. We slowly showed that these toys weren't actually toys, that they were tools for changing the future. And I think both of us sort of grew up in that. But what was the moment? You speak briefly about this when you got your Commodore 64. What was the moment? What was the technology? What was the product when you said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life? This is the industry that I want to be in. And it's not about the money. It's about the fact that this is where my passion is.
I mean, for me, it was the internet. So I came out of college and I saw hyperlink for the first time in 1992. And who would have, 1993, 25 years ago this month, you had Mosaic released. And if somebody had looked ahead 25 years and said, we're going to connect 2 billion computers together with common communication protocols, what do you think that's going to do? I mean, who in the world would have ever imagined that it would give you Google and Amazon and eBay and Etsy and Uber and Airbnb and Baidu? I mean, it would give you everything. It would generate $25 trillion in wealth, 1 million new companies, and even though I don't think anybody knew it at the time, anybody had any sense, I think everybody had a vague sense that it was something important, and I just wanted. I've never left the internet space since then, and I just wanted to. I'm still fascinated by it. I feel very disconnected when I'm not attached to it, and I mean I travel to some places where I don't have access, and it's always very isolating, and so it's now we've I think come to kind of crave this connection.
Right. I think you've just described most regular life for most of our audience. We all have that phantom phone syndrome where you're always reaching for that mobile device, even if it's not connected anymore. All right, now let's move forward because I do want to talk about your book. It's a fascinating read, The Fourth Age. First of all, because it's not just a raw book for robotics. It's not just a brief look at artificial intelligence. You systematically go through the history of mankind, and you disprove some of the biggest woes about technology. We spoke briefly at the start of the show about how the popular trend is to demonize technology. It's to show that it's going to cause us to lose jobs. And yet, you spend the first few chapters of your book talking about how we've gone through that exact same thing with every revolution of technology, from antiquity all the way up to modernity. Tell me a little bit about what it was like for earlier human civilizations to go through the same sort of thing where something new develops and it's both exciting and scary.
Well, what I did with this book, I wrote it to kind of fill a need that I thought was in the market, and what it doesn't do is it doesn't actually ever tell you what I think. Because that's not the purpose of it. I didn't want to write a book where I'm just like another person with an opinion who wants you to think the same way I think. So what I wrote was a book that is Socratic. It doesn't ever actually tell you. It actually works through these questions. It works through these questions. So I started by noticing that when you talk about automation, there are 3 different kind of camps. There are people that think it's going to take every job there is. And then there are people who say that's ridiculous. It's going to create more jobs. We're going to have a shortage of humans. And then you've got people who say, no, it's going to kill off all the low-skilled jobs and we're going to be in a permanent Great Depression. So you have that. Three completely different viewpoints. And I wanted to know, why did people believe different things about those questions? And then you think of the issue of AI. So you have some people like Elon Musk, who says it's going to kill us all. It's as dangerous as nuclear war and all that. And then you have people like Andrew Ng, who says, That's like worrying about overpopulation on Mars. That's just a preposterous thought. And so, again, these are all intelligent people. So why do they believe different things? Is an AI going to become conscious? Some people say yeah, and some people say it won't. And so I got really interested in why there were so many different viewpoints. And what I realized is that it's not that those people know different things than each other. It's because they believe different things. And so what I did is I made 3 questions. I think with asking my reader 3 questions, none of which are technical. And the answers to those questions, I think, inform those very technical things. Is AI good or bad? Is automation going to take or destroy jobs? And so the reason the book is called The Fourth Age is because I think 3 other times in the past, new technology has come along that has changed humans, like physically changed us, set us on a completely new trajectory. And the first time was 100,000 years ago when we got fire. Fire let us cook our food. Cooking our food gave us more calories. We used those calories to grow our brains. And when we did that, we got language. And language is this great ability we had that we can coordinate our actions. And then 10,000 years ago, we got agriculture. And when you got agriculture, you got the city. And when you got the city, you got the division of labor. And when you got the division of labor, you got prosperity. And then you got warfare because there was wealth finally to take. And that changed us. And the third time things changed was just 5,000 years ago when we got writing. Writing was a way to outsource your memory. It meant what you knew could live apart from you. And we got it at the exact same instant historically that we got the wheel. And the reason those 2 technologies are paired is because with writing and the wheel, you have everything you need for a nation state. And so 5,000 years ago, out of nowhere, all over the world, people who didn't know each other, they you started having empires, Mesoamerica, Mesopotamia, the Po, the Indus, and all the rest. And so I think the position of the book is that we're at the brink of this fourth age. This fourth time, technology is going to change us in such a dramatic way that it's going to alter everything. And those 2 technologies are artificial intelligence, where we kind of outsource thought, and robotics, where we outsource motion. And the question I was interested in is, if we get machines to do thinking and do what our bodies do, then what are we? And what's going to happen? And so I ask these 3 questions of my reader, and then from their answers to those 3 questions, I walk through the implications of them all.
Now let's actually talk about some of the implications of those questions. You talked about how we've gone through history developing new technologies, how they've changed our world. It's of your opinion that this is the 4th great age, the 4th time that we've sort of rewritten who we are as a people, or at least we're on the verge of rewriting who we are. But I can't help but look back at the same examples that you brought up, fire and language, and then the wheel, the development of culture, and see that it's not just technology. It's not just the addition of technology. It's when there's a critical mass of what technology does to both the way that we develop knowledge and also the way that we relate to one another, because there's been a fundamental change in how we actually relate to other people. You saw it with the development of fire, when you actually start to have the coalescence of small groups, and then the development of agriculture, where you can now have stable populations. I think that's actually one of the things that people are afraid of with this 4th age, because it's going to demand, again, a change in the way that we relate to one another. And I think this also plays into why people are so afraid of it, because they see what has happened in the last 25 years with the advent of the internet, and they think, I don't like what's happening to my relationships, or I don't understand the way that this is developing. You don't directly address that, but I mean, that's essentially what the book is trying to do.
What I would say 2 things to that. One, you're entirely right. Technology is only half the equation. The other half is this nebulous concept of civilization. This way that we progressively learn how to get along better. And that technology helps with that in a number of ways. But I don't know that you can look at the last 25 years and look at the internet and have any opinion other than on net, it's been dramatically good. I mean, let's look at it this way. They invented forums. And nobody ever said, in the future, you're going to be able to post any question you want.
Right.
What will I do? What should I do in Seattle with 2 kids? And some stranger is going to write you an answer, and they get nothing for that. Nobody ever posited that there's going to be an encyclopedia, that people will not only labor for no money, but in anonymity. Nobody posited that the open source movement would come about, that there would be people who would write code, work very hard, and give it away for free. Mm-hmm. I think of my father's generation. My father probably never wrote once he left college. And if I had asked him, Dad, why don't you write? He would have said, well, I don't know. I don't have anything I want to say. Turns out that's not true either. The minute we invented blogs, 100 million people started them. The minute Amazon says you can review products, billions of reviews get written. The minute YouTube says upload your video, everybody's a filmmaker. The minute iTunes makes it easy to distribute music, the amount of music explodes. And it turns out everybody on this planet wants to create. Everybody wants to make beautiful things. Everybody wants to learn. Everybody wants to share what they know with other people. And it isn't that my father and his generation didn't write because they didn't have anything to say. They didn't write because they didn't have the internet. And all of a sudden we invent this technology and it shows us altruistic, helping each other. And I mean, sure, I know all of the dark cases of the things people do with technology, but on balance, we use it to connect to each other, to access information, to learn and to share beliefs and all of it. I mean, it is a universally good thing to connect people together. And I don't know how a narrative forms that somehow we were better off with, 3 television channels and you went to the library to photocopy pages from books if you wanted to learn something. I don't know how somebody makes that case.
See, so I'm with you. You. I hold the same viewpoint. I hold the same worldview. I believe that it's been a positive, a very net positive change. But I also work with and live with people who they're not panicky and they're not fearing for fear's sake, but they feel that we've lost something. And I think these are the same people who are pushing that negative narrative. And it's so hard to try to address them because they just figure that you're part of it. You've already been irrevocably changed. You've been damaged by technology, and therefore you don't understand. You don't see how much better it was before we had X, Y, or Z. That's the kind of person I want to give your book to, honestly. That's the person who I think could benefit the most because it might help them to take a look at it and say, okay, maybe this is just regular fear. Maybe this is just a regular way of looking at things that I just don't understand what has been brought to me. But let's get away from that. Let's actually talk about the second major section of your book. It's when you actually go into AI. And I'm so happy that you did this. You made a point of defining AI, at least the AI that we think we know right now, as narrow AI. What exactly does it mean? What do you define as narrow AI?
So AI is a hard term. It doesn't really have a meaning that you can kind of point to and say. And it's a bad term kind of for 2 reasons: the word artificial and the word intelligence. Other than that, it's great. The man who created the term later regretted it. But what we do know is that whatever you call it, there are 2 distinctly different ideas. And one is what we have today, which is narrow AI, and that is an artificial intelligence that can do one thing: a spam filter in your inbox, the thing that routes your car to the destination, the sprinkler system that comes on when the yard's dry, whatever. It can do one thing. The kind of AI that when you hear people say, we're doomed, it's going to kill us all, that's something that doesn't exist yet. It's called general artificial intelligence, and it is an AI that is as smart and versatile as a human being. So it's like an AI MacGyver. You ask it to fix a coffee maker, it'll go do it. You ask it if you should break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, it will tell you. I mean, it's completely versatile, and we don't know how to make that. And that's the thing that people are afraid of, because they think that if we ever make it and it's digital, that it'll very quickly be twice as smart as us, then 4, then 8, then 16, then 32, and 64, and then eventually it doesn't even recognize us. It lives at a different time scale and whatnot. But that is we know we can build narrow AI. It's everywhere, but we don't know if we can build a general AI. And that, to my mind, is an open question. And that's one of the questions that I try to address with the 3 foundational questions I ask at the beginning of the book.
Right. And all the AI systems, at least what we've been calling AI systems, that drive self-driving cars, learning machines, translators that learn from their mistakes, that's all narrow. But for some reason, we think that's sci-fi AI, that it will just continue to grow, it will continue to expand. But you make a point in your book in saying, look, narrow AI is great. Narrow AI it's useful, but it's incredibly constrained. By its design, it's constrained. You will never have a narrow AI that becomes general. It just can't, because we don't even know how to design that yet. We don't even know what is a design for that might look like. So we deal with narrow AI. We live in a world of narrow AI. My question to you would be, how do we get people to understand that? How do we get people to understand that there actually is this chasm between what sci-fi would say AI is and what we actually have on a daily basis?
I don't know.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. But what's the damage from people not knowing that?
Well, I think that is very real, in the sense that we can use narrow AI to cure disease and learn how to save energy and learn how to live more sustainably and how to build better roads and grow better food. And I mean, you have so many applications of it. You have tractors that have little cameras on the side that when they spot a weed, they just spray that one weed with insecticide, so they're not spraying the whole field, just when they find a weed. You have, you just have so many applications of it, and all of them are, I think, almost all of them doing good for humanity. The minute somebody says we should be afraid of AI, all of that, all the air kind of gets sucked out of the room, and all of the kind of enthusiasm behind all of these really good projects just gets what you were saying a minute ago, just a little bit of caution interjected into it, and it slows it down just a little bit. And that, in a very real sense, can, cause people to die, right? I mean, like, if we just said, no, we're afraid of the technology, and let's just, turn off all the computers, that is bad for people, and that is bad for humans.
Right. Of course, artificial general intelligence, we'll get to that a little bit later. We can get to the scary stories that have been developed about what that might lead to. But there is a bit more fact-based concerns. I won't even call them fears. I'll call them concerns about what narrow AI might actually do. And this is more pragmatic. These are people who are seeing what automation is doing, and they're saying, wait a minute, are we getting to a point where we're going to make humans obsolete? Are we getting to a point where I'm designing robots and narrow AIs that will take my job? What would you want to say to those people?
Well, in the book, I cover all 3 of those viewpoints. The viewpoint that is exactly what will happen. And then the viewpoint that, no, it will take every job. It'll write better poetry and be a better president and act better in movies, everything. And then the view that, no, that's all preposterous. I will say that you may have heard a study that gets thrown around a lot, an Oxford study, a fine study that says 47% of jobs are going to be replaced by automation, or at least that's how it's reported. The interesting thing is that the writers of the study go out of their way to say, we're not saying that at all. What we're saying is 47% of the things that people do in their jobs may be automated. And that's not particularly news, right? If you look back 20 years, probably 47% of things that people did in their office job has been automated. I mean, that's not particularly news. If you look, though, there's an OECD study, that nonpartisan, multinational, that said what entire jobs can be replaced by machines, then they came up with the number 9%. I have a robot job test on my website, byronreese.com, and it asks you 10 questions about a job, and you can answer, how much mobility does it require, how much empathy, and all of that. You can answer it, and we find virtually no jobs are where the entire job is going to be replaced by automation, and there's a big misconception also about how that works, and it goes like this. Imagine a series of jobs from really high skilled ones up here all the way down to just like, an order taker at a fast food place, a low skilled job. And here's what people say. They say automation's really good at creating awesome new high-end jobs like a geneticist. And what it does is it destroys all these low-skilled jobs like order taker at a restaurant. And then here's the part I think is where the shell game part happens. They say, do you really think that person who was an order taker at a restaurant is going to become a geneticist?
Right.
And the answer to that is no, not at all. That isn't how it works. What happens is a college professor becomes a geneticist. The high school teacher goes and works for the college. The substitute teacher gets hired on full time, all the way down. So the question isn't, can that order taker become a geneticist? The question is, this is the important part, can everybody do a job just a little harder than the job they're doing today? If the answer to that is yes, which I believe is true, then every time technology creates a job at the high end, everybody gets a promotion. Everybody goes up a notch. And so for 250 years, this is exactly what has happened. For 250 years in this country, we have had full employment, other than the Depression, and we've had rising wages. And the way that that's happened for 250 years is automation and technology creates great new jobs, destroys really bad jobs, and everybody goes up a notch. And that is... there's no reason in the world to think that that is not going to continue to happen that way for the next 250 years. This idea somehow that when you think of what a person can do, and you take something like a waiter who has to go and take an order, and then they have to answer questions, and then they have to clean up baby spit up and clean up a fallen drink and then give somebody the Heimlich. I don't know. I mean, there's this like incredible range of things that humans can do, and robots can't. I mean, they simply cannot. They are tolerably good at repetitive motion that never changes. And other than that, humans hands down. There's not a robot that can duplicate what a 3-year-old can do, let alone what an adult can do. And so I think what happens is these studies come out, and then it sells. It gets clicks when they say Oxford says 47% of jobs will be lost to automation.
Well, fear
and then
sells. Fear always sells.
It scares people, and I'm at a point where I think it's deliberate, not in any conspiratorial sense, but you just do that enough and enough and enough, and people lose confidence, and I think they kind of lose the big picture that this is good for everybody. All these great new jobs mean we all get to go up a notch, and we all get a raise, and we all get a promotion. Why? Because technology makes us more productive, and the way that wages rise is through increasing productivity. We don't make more money because we work twice as many hours. We do it compared to 100 years ago. We do it because our work is twice as productive, and if automation is the villain, then assembly lines are bad, and nail guns are bad, and if automation's the villain, then you want to make everybody kind of work with their hands like frozen in ice water, so they work much slower, and then you need more people. And you need to outlaw machines. You need to outlaw tractors and all of that. And you'll create an enormous number of jobs, and the standard of living will plummet because everybody's productivity goes down. So to vilify automation is to turn your back on 250 years of history. Now, people will hear that, and they will say, this time is different. This time is different. They'll either say, it's happening much faster now. That's kind of one tack. Or they'll say, it's going after the thinking jobs and not just the physical jobs. And interestingly, the idea that this time is different also was common in the 60s and common in the 30s and common at the beginning. But I think each of those two arguments, that it's faster now or that it's going after a different kind of work, I think they're both spurious as well. That being said, I give them a full airing, and in the book, I mean, I want I want the reader to take their answers to those three questions and kind of work through it. And if in the end you believe people are machines, then maybe someday we'll build a mechanical person. And if we ever can build a mechanical person, then maybe that mechanical person will be better than an organic person. But if you don't believe people are machines, then that there is something substantially different between a human being and a machine, then the machines are never going to be able to do what we do.
I love that you're discussing this, because this is the entry into the golden age of humanity, the recognition of this process. Now, I do want to have a discussion with you about this, because we had another guest not too long ago who had much the same conversation. And I want to toss some of his ideas about his concept of the golden age against you. Would that be okay? Fantastic. We'll get to that in just a bit, but first, let's go ahead and take a moment to thank the sponsor of this episode of Triangulation. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you like applying for a mortgage? Do you like the process? Do you like going into a bank, speaking to a complete stranger, maybe bringing a banker's box filled with old receipts and faded pay stubs? Well, if you do, you need help, because it's a horrible process. It's not at all who we are. It's not at all indicative of where we are in our development as a society. And it's just downright backwards by comparison to the digital world in which we live. And that's why we're so happy to have Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans as a sponsor of Triangulation. Now, Rocket Mortgage recognized that the mortgage experience wasn't keeping up with the times. It was dated and it needed a client-focused technological revolution. And so it gives you exactly that. It gives you the confidence you need when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. A Rocket Mortgage is simple. It allows you to fully understand all the details and be confident that you're getting the right mortgage for you. There's no broker standing over your shoulder trying to get you to sign, trying to push you through all the fine print. You can examine everything at your time, in your space, where you're comfortable. It's also convenient. Their trusted partners allow you to share your financial information with Rocket Mortgage at the touch of a button. It's entirely digital, just like the rest of your life. It's powerful. Whether you're looking to buy your first home or your 10th, Rocket Mortgage is able to perform thousands of calculations in just seconds. And with those calculations, based on your income, your assets, and your credit, Rocket Mortgage can analyze all of the home loan options for which you qualify and then find the one that's just right for you. It's Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Apply simply, understand fully, mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/triangulation. That's rocketmortgage.com/triangulation. Equal housing lender license in all 50 states. NMLS consumeraccess.org, number 3030. And we thank Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans for their support of Triangulation. Let's get back to it. We are having a conversation with Mr. Byron Reese. He is the author of The Fourth Age. That's right, the smart robots, conscious computers, and the future of humanity. Mr. Reese, not too long ago, I had a conversation on much this same subject. And what the speaker tried to bring out was we were asking the wrong questions when we think about robots, when we think about robots taking our jobs, that we are so concerned with how we are going to earn a living and how robots are going to take that away from us, when we actually should be focusing on what robots will do to change the relationship we have to work. He had a very interesting idea. This was that we have formed our society around forming workers to fit in the little pegs and pieces that we need to keep our society going, and that once you start introducing robotics and artificial intelligence, you don't necessarily have to do that anymore. You can change the structure of society, and it goes from being a question of where am I going to make my living to what do I want to do? Where do I find my passion? And more importantly, how do I promote society? How do I construct it? How do I make it better? Does this mesh with your idea of the golden age of humanity?
Well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily inconsistent. So this person was advocating like a universal basic income or something like that?
Something like that.
Right. I mean, Maynard Keynes, back in the 30s, wrote an article, and he said, in the future, in 100 years, 2030, so we're almost there, the GDP is going to be 8 times higher, and people will only work 15 hours a week. And I assume we've all had this thought, because we say, I have all this technology that increases my productivity. Why am I still working so hard? And so what happened? Like, why is that? Because it turns out he was exactly right with the amount of economic growth we had. And so why aren't we working 15 hours a week? And it turns out that the reason we're not is that if you make, say, $60,000, and you are working 40 hours a week, and you say, I'm only going to work 15 hours a week, then your pay is going to cut down to whatever, $20,000-ish. And it turns out you can live the way a person in 1930 lived on that money. You can live a 600 square foot place, grow most of your own food, no air conditioning, no medical insurance, no college, no vacation. And so you can say, wow. And then if you make half that, you make $30,000 today, and all of a sudden you cut way down. And then you can live the way a person in that economic strata lived in 1930. And again, it's not a good life. It's not a life any of us want, right? And so what has happened is, as GNP has grown and as personal income has grown, we have grown what we expect. We want all this other stuff, and therefore we work just as many hours. Keynes, by the way, died of overwork, so he was probably conflicted of this. But so I think in 2047 or 2048, people are going to say, wait a minute, I can work less, but I'll have to live like they lived in 2018? You mean I'll have to look at the price at stuff before I decide to buy it? And I'm going to have to live in a house that's on the ground, and cockroaches and stuff might come into it, and I'm not going to know what's in all my food.
My phone will be in my pocket and not embedded in my head.
I won't and then they'll say, no, I'm going to stay late at the fusion plant because I want to make more money. And they're going to keep working 40 hours. So the idea that we're going to somehow fundamentally change everything is based on a notion that AI and robotics are going to create so much wealth, the factories will run themselves. And it's a very old dream. In fact, the play that gave us the word robot, a Czech play 100 years ago, that was the promise. It said, with our robots, the factories will run themselves, everything will be free, is very similar to today. And if that came to pass, I'm sure that things would, economics would change differently. Right. The UBI is not a new idea. I mean, it was advocated by Thomas Paine, one of the founding fathers. Buckminster Fuller thinks this idea of, quote, earning a living is a terrible idea. Like, you have to do something to deserve to live. And so, it's an old idea, but we've never gotten to this point where there's so much wealth that people no longer needed to be involved in the production of it. I write about it extensively in this book. I mean, I talk about the UBI, and again, I kind of put my 3 questions up against it, and we kind of go through every possible scenario of how it will turn out. One thing that should be noted, though, is that people talk a lot about the increasing gap between the rich and the poor. And I think that may be a little bit, maybe not exactly the thing we should keep our eye on. It is unquestionable that it is easier to make $1 billion today than it's ever been. I mean, not for me too, obviously, but Facebook made 6 billionaires, Google made 5. The percent of global billionaires who made their money as opposed to inheriting it goes up every year. That is a thing that I don't think is particularly a bad or good thing. It just happens to be easy to affect 1 billion people's lives and make $1 billion. I think what we should focus on is the absolute living standard of the poor and getting that to go up as quickly as we can. I mean, half the world lives on $3 a day or less. People, the poorest half of this country, I mean, all the stats. They can't afford an unexpected $500 bill. 80% of people say they can't. And I think that's kind of what we should focus on, is how do you get more wealth in the hands of the poorest people, both worldwide and in this country. And to talk about inequality, it's the billionaires, I think again, it's a big distraction from what we really want to do, which is bring everybody's standard of living up to as high as we can, frankly.
And that's what I loved about the book, because you present all sides. And one of the tensions in this book is this idea that robotics and AI can bring great wealth. They can bring great productivity, but then you also have to consider, how is it used? In your book, in your mind, you get great wealth, you get great productivity, but people will always want more. And it kind of stretches out the social strata rather than raising up the bottom. How do we get from that to the golden age of humanity? What is the golden age of humanity for you?
Well, for me, the golden age of humanity is for everyone to live in peace and prosperity, and for everyone to sleep in their own bed at night unafraid, and to live their life not in fear of economic want. All over the world, I am certain there are Da Vinci's who will never paint Mona Lisa because they live in a crazy poor area. There are Madame Curies who will never work with radium because they just have to figure out how to live. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible thing, and it's in everybody's best interest for everybody to live safe and secure.
Right.
I mean, we are essentially, we live, as it were, on a speck, set adrift, in space, and this eternal darkness. And all that we actually have is each other. And the goal should be, I think, to get everybody up to a point where they don't live in fear and they don't live in want. And the thing is that has been an ancient dream. The Greeks said to make gentle the life of man, to make it so that that life is not hard for everyone. And that is an old dream. And the thing about it is, it's always been a dream. And we are the first people who ever live in a time that you can do it. You actually can do it. And why can you do it? Because of technology. Because this miraculous thing multiplies what you are able to do, so that you become more than just your biology. You become, you're empowered with all of this other. It's interesting. A human uses, if you eat 2,000 calories a day, you burn about 100 watts of power. So your body constantly is like a bright light bulb. And all you can do on your own is 100 watts worth of work. And turns out, though, when we harnessed oxen, they eat 4,000 calories a day. So we were able to have 200 more watts of power, and we raised their standard of living. In this country, in the United States, you use 10,000 watts of power. There's 100 times what you're able to do because of just the electrified technology around you. And then in poor parts of the world, like Afghanistan, it's 300 watts. That counts the 100 watts of the person. And so they only have, and that is a ticket to poverty. And so I think our pathway to this golden age of plenty and free of want is using more technology and consuming more clean and sustainable energy.
It's interesting. I'm getting a couple of responses from our chat room. Ripple Writer actually typifies what I'm hearing. He says, I like his viewpoint, but, well, people in greed. And there is this, there is this reaction that people have whenever they hear someone describe something like that, where we should be able to ease the burden of the people in the worst situations. Well, they'll kind of roll their eyes and they'll say, that's just not realistic. That's never going to happen.
It isn't realistic to expect it to come about purely through human, through benevolence. But it is a fact that the number of people, the percent of people on this planet living in absolute poverty is halved since 1980. The number of people living in absolute poverty in this planet has gone down. The UN had to reconvene and come up with new goals for when there'll be no more hungry people in the world, because they already hit their milestones earlier than they expected. How will we feed everybody? We'll feed everybody because for 10,000 years, it took 90% of all of our energy, all of our work, all of our people to make our food. And now in the West, it takes 2%. In the other parts of the world, it's more. but that will continue to fall. And that's how you feed people, because you make food incredibly inexpensive and you make seeds more productive. We will use technology to, 3D printing and local power generation, solar energy. I mean, we're going to use these new technologies to enable the bottom billion, the most intractable problem we have, the billion people left in the world who are truly desperately poor. Their pathway out is not necessarily isn't through altruism. It's through technology, and bit by bit, they multiply what they're able to do. They increase their productivity, and they make more. You don't have to have poor people, and you don't have to have poor countries in the world. In fact, it's better if you don't. If the whole world's a market for what you make, it isn't. It's just like disease. We don't have to have disease. We have disease because we haven't figured out how to solve it. We don't have to have hunger. In the United States, we throw away enough food to feed all the hungry people in the world. We only have it because we haven't solved it. And we only have poverty because we haven't solved it. And it is just a technical problem. And if it is a technical problem, it has a technical solution. And technology does this amazing thing where it doubles and doubles and doubles on a consistent basis. With computers, it's every 2 years. Other technologies, it's every 10, every 6, or what have you. But it always gets better and better and better and better. It empowers people to do more and more and more. I have no doubt whatsoever that we will get there. It's all just a matter of how quickly. You cannot look. I don't think you can look across a span of human history from where we used to be. I mean, just think about it. Where there was a time when humans were down to 400 breeding pairs. I mean, we were an endangered species. And then slowly we learned to get along better, and we created civilization, we created laws, we learned to grow our food and to raise animals and to do all of the rest. And you can look at any time in history, any part of the world, by any measure you want of progress, and things are better right now than they've ever been. We live longer, and we rule ourselves more. The individual liberty is higher. The status of women has increased. All of it. And it's because of civilization and technology advancing us hand in hand. And technology is about to take off even more. And so our ability to kind of supercharge this only grows in power.
Now that is the kind of message that I want to hear from our futurists. That's, it's not that it's a fantasy. It's not a fairy tale. It's a logistical problem. It's a technology problem. It's a societal reformatting problem. And that's, I think, what futurists can help us to look at. Let's go back to the book, because in the latter half of the book is when you get into what I find incredibly interesting, and that's when you move into artificial general intelligence. What is that? We've already talked about narrow intelligence. What is artificial general intelligence?
Artificial general intelligence is an AI that's as versatile as a human. And there's a thought that if we ever build it, it will become an artificial superintelligence. It's like a superintelligence. In other words, it will grow and grow and grow and grow and grow and grow so far that it can no longer relate to us. Now, a whole third of the book is about consciousness, because we have this ability. You experience the world, right? Like you taste an orange. You feel warmth. A computer can measure temperature, but you feel warmth. You experience the world. And that, people say we don't know what consciousness is. This isn't true. We all kind of agree. It's your experience of the world. What we don't know is how it comes about, and nobody knows if you need it to make a general intelligence. Does something have to experience the world in order to be as versatile as a human? We certainly are conscious, and our consciousness is how we kind of change focus. And I mean, there's a lot to it. So we don't know that. We don't know. So you have a brain, and we don't know how human brains work. And some people think we don't know how human brains work because we have so many neurons, 100 billion. But this isn't true. There's something called the open worm. There's this worm called the nematode worm. Most successful animal on the planet. They're about as long as a hair is wide. Right. Their brains have 302 neurons. And for 20 years, people have been trying to model that in a computer. Can you make a digital nematode worm? Can you model that worm's activity in a computer? And I don't think any closer to doing it than we were when we started. So we don't know how any brains work. It could turn out that a neuron is as complicated as a supercomputer. So we have this brain. It does these things we don't really know how it does it, and that's all well and good. Then we have something called a mind. What is a mind? A mind is all of the stuff your brain can do that you wouldn't think 3 pounds of goo could do. Like, you have a sense of humor. Does your liver have a sense of humor? You know, does your stomach crack jokes? Probably not. But so we have all of these abilities that we don't really know how they come about. It could be emergent. It could be any number of other things. And then we have consciousness. And that's the big mystery. That's our experience of the world. So the question is, to make a general intelligence, what of that do you need? Well, you certainly need a brain of some kind as versatile as a human. And presumably you need a mind, because you would expect this general intelligence to be creative. And that's something that comes from the mind. You know, your liver is not creative, but somehow your mind is. And then it may actually need to be conscious. In the book, I talk about 8 different theories of consciousness and which ones are compatible with machine consciousness and which ones are not. Again, all the way through the lens of those 3 questions.
Along with consciousness is going to come free will. And what does free will look like to a computer?
That is very good. There's a chapter called Free Will. Does it exist? And what I write is that it's not the same thing as consciousness, but they feel kind of like opposite sides of a coin. You decide to take a bite of the apple, and you taste the apple. You have a sense that you made a decision, that you exercised will. When you go to the doctor and they whack you on the knee and you kick, there's no free will in that.
Right.
They hit you, you kicked, and you didn't have to think about it. So the question is, why doesn't our whole life feel like that? Why doesn't our whole life feel like that kick? What benefit is there to us having some illusion that we are making choices? Do we have free will? It's been said that everything in science says we don't, and everything in personal experience says we do. We certainly have a sense that we have it. We certainly think we have it. I go through some really interesting studies in the book that talk about how there have been some things that suggest that your brain makes a decision, like that knee-jerk decision, and then later you try to decide why you did that, and then your brain encodes that backwards in the cause and effect backwards. And so I write about free will a bit, because if we don't actually have free will, then building a conscious computer is probably easier. If we do have free will, then how do you manufacture that in a fab? I don't know, because we don't know where it would come from. You see, you can't say we only have 2 sets of natural laws. We have Newtonian physics, which says every cause has an effect. You stubbing your toe this morning on the bed frame, you could figure that out all the way back. That goes all the way back to the Big Bang. It was inevitable that was going to happen. And then we have quantum theory, which says for certain things, they are truly random. They're truly random in the most profound sense of the word. And that doesn't get you free will either. All that means is that maybe at best you're some kind of a random acting mad person or something. So it's very hard to account for free will. I also write extensively about sentience. Sentience is a misused word, by the way. Oftentimes in science fiction, it means smart. But that word would be sapient. That's why we're Homo sapiens. Sentient means you can feel something. You have the experience of feeling like pain. And so the question is, how would a computer feel? How would a computer feel anything? And sentience is required for consciousness. There has to be an I that experiences the pain, and there has to be an I that is aware of that experience. So we don't really know who's sentient on this planet. I mean, we know the extremes pretty easily, people and higher animals and all of that. We assume bacteria are not all the way through. But the question is, how can a machine be conscious? I mean, be sentient? And that boils down to, well, are we machines?
Now, Mr. Reese, what would you like to leave with your reader? Someone who picks up your book, someone who looks at the development of society, the development of humanity, the history of our use of technology, all the way up to narrow AI and then general AI, and then this idea, the concept of a conscious computer. What do you want to have them walk away from the book with? Because you've done a masterful job of just sort of presenting information without trying to put your own bias into the book. But at the end, what's the message for them? Because, I mean, you try to instill a little bit of hopefulness for the technology, but ultimately, what do they walk away from the book with?
Well, the part of me that I do inject into it is kind of where I kind of, no matter what happens with automation and with AI and all of that, I have a deep belief that kind of we have this. I have a deep abiding belief in humanity. I believe in us, and I think we can do this. I would like to pose, in closing, the 3 questions just to give people something to mull over. The first question I ask in the book is, what are we? And I give you 3 choices. Are we machines? Or are we animals, which are kind of machines with this mysterious thing called life? Or are we humans? And obviously we're humans, but it means something more, that we're machines with life and maybe something else. Maybe we have consciousness. Maybe we have a soul, something else. The second question is, what is yourself? When you look in the mirror, what are you seeing, actually? And there are 3 choices of that. You could be seeing, it could all just be an elaborate trick of the brain, which is what most brain scientists think. There is no you in there. There's no voice in your head at all. It could be an emergent property. And again, I write a lot about that, what that means. Or it could be your soul or your spirit or something else. That's you. And then the last question is about the nature of reality itself. It's a very old question, and the answers are monism and dualism. Monism is a belief that everything is made of one substance. There are atoms in the void, according to Democritus. Dualism says that there's mental things as well, and they exist, ideas, and so forth. And your answers to those 3 questions, I believe, if you kind of like work through those 3 questions, which I think are accessible to everybody, should give you a lot of confidence in how the future is going to unfold with technology. Because those 3 questions, interestingly, are what everything hangs on. And all of these questions about AI, all these questions about automation, all these questions about conscious computers, just simply hang on the answers to those 3 questions.
And the best part of those 3 questions is that they can spark some wonderful conversations. We have been speaking with Mr. Byron Reese. He is the author of The Fourth Age, Smart Robots, Conscious Computers, and the Future of Humanity. Mr. Reese, I want to thank you very much for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us and really your vision of a golden future, not a dark, deep future where robots have destroyed humanity, but one where it lifts them up. Could you please tell our audience where they can find you, where they can find all of your work, and maybe where they can find your next speaking engagement?
I am the easiest person in the world to find. You can email me at byronreese@gmail. You can go to byronreese.com. I'm at Byron Reese on Twitter. I'm lucky I got into all of this early, because I'm sure every subsequent Byron Reese is like, oh, they're all taken. So I'm easy to find. And I just want everybody to I don't know. I would encourage people not to give in to the fear mongers, all the people that try to, I think, frighten people about the future, because things have never, ever, ever, ever looked better for us than they do right now.
And thank you for that, Mr. Reese. Thank you for being on Triangulation.
Thanks so much.
And folks, thank you for joining us. Don't forget that we do this show every Friday around 3:00 p.m. Pacific time. You can find us at live.twit.tv. As long as you're watching live, why not jump into our chat room at irc.twit.tv and just be part of the show. It's a great way to actually give your feedback to the host as we're going. Also, don't forget that you can find all of our episodes at our show page at twit.tv/triangulation or try. If you go there, you can find all of our back episodes as well as a place to subscribe. If you'd like to get Triangulation into your device of choice every week automatically, you can get an audio version, a video version, or a high-definition video version. And of course, you can always find the show wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Until next time, I'm Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit, saying goodbye and thank you for joining us on Triangulation.